You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Nick Manasiotis.
Manasiotis. You almost had it.
Manasiotis. God, it's so mystical and wonderful, and it's like the kid in class whose name's Beowulf. Like nobody's fucking with that kid. That kid,
right.
front of the lunch line. He gets the first slice of pizza at lunch.
That's fantastic.
So Nick, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, man. So I'm 25. I live out in Illinois. I 2 years ago just graduated from Columbia College Chicago. I went to school for filmmaking. So most of my life really is just centered around filmmaking and movies and stuff. Since then, I've been working with a Chicago-based designer who actually just recently launched a fragrance. And I got to travel the world with him and film a bunch of stuff for the fragrance. We got to film little ingredients that go into it. So a lot of videography and stuff, which is pretty cool. And then on top of that, I'm doing my own podcasting as well. Yeah, man, that's pretty much what I do. Just filmmaking stuff.
Where'd you get your fascination for filmmaking? Because I took a class in high school, communication arts, and I found out a lot actually goes into filmmaking rather than just pointing a camera and videotaping.
For sure. I think for me, I don't really know what it was, but I know I always had it because when I was a young kid, I loved getting DVDs, like movie DVDs. So if I saw a film or something in the theater and I ended up liking it so much, I was always very anxious to get the DVD because for me, I loved listening to the commentary. I loved the special features. I loved there was something about the craft of making them that for whatever reason just drew me. And then when I was, I think at the time I was in middle school, and oddly enough, I came out of watching James Cameron's Avatar. And though it's not the best movie ever, there was something about it visually that struck me. And then I thought to myself, wow, somebody actually made this. I want to do that. So it kind of clicked after that moment. But I've always I don't know what it was about it. Just always been about I don't know. My life's just always been about that. I've always thought in terms of filmmaking and stuff.
A lot of people don't understand deleted scenes from movies. Now, there's one movie in particular in my high school years that I, around the time I was diving into the Mary J universe, I was pretty lazy. I didn't want to get up and change the kind of the disc out of the, the Xbox. So I'd sit there and just watch Step Brothers over and over and over and over and over again with a salad bowl of Lucky Charms in front of me. And I remember seeing on the special edition, there was a commentary thing, and I started listening to it. That is a gold comedy treasure. Mm-hmm. They're not even talking about the movie. Next thing you know, an hour in, it's the part where they're doing karate in the garage. They had an NBA superstar come in, and they're just sitting there just talking like normal. They're not even talking about the movie. Then halfway through, they're just oh, we should probably be talking about the movie.
That's
but I'm
fantastic.
Sitting there kind of stoned off my ass just laughing because I'm I don't even know what's going on right now. Right now I'm listening to him sing that song at the ending at the Catalina wine mixer, and they're talking about remember Talladega Nights? Remember Shake and Bake? And I'm oh my God, it was so just an extra feature where I was this is amazing. And I have a little bit of a passion kind of for photography and filmmaking when it comes to making scenes. I remember for my communication arts class, we would always have to make videos and the class would have to watch them. So I'd get a bunch of my friends together. We did the one scene from Anger Management with Adam Sandler and Jack Nicholson. I actually put it on my Instagram. And it was the breakfast scene where, there's music in the background. My buddy's cooking eggs and he gives me a plate of eggs. And I look down, kind of look at the egg, pick it up, put it on the plate, and I just grab it and I throw it full force against my fridge and it just shatters. And he looks, he goes, "What?" I'm I said over easy.
There you go.
It was such a thing where it was a way for your friends to connect, and it makes you look back, especially learning about angles, low angles, high angles, side views, different camera portions and stuff that you start to realize like how much goes into the extent of actually filming a movie.
Absolutely. I mean, same with me. When I was younger, I definitely messed around with my parents' like handy cam, like their Sony handy cam and whatever. And then I was always just kind of like trying to just film stuff. Never always edited them, but I just loved like the angles, and I love that cinematic quality to like just being able to film anything and make it seem like, in my eyes, this belongs in a theater or something. And I definitely did a lot of stuff with my friends too. In fact, I did a lot of stuff in high school for some friends of mine who had like projects, who would have like class projects, and they needed to do like a video or something. They would just hire me to do the video for them. I wasn't even in the class, and that was a lot of fun too. But to go back on your commentary thing too, which I think is really interesting about that is, I like listening to commentary with more than one person too, because it's almost like a podcast. And I love listening to other podcasts as well. So I think like there's something about that, and people forget about commentary. There's something about listening to conversations that I think is also just fascinating on a totally different level.
Not
People
only
just
expanding
like,
your own knowledge, but like you can tell, like me, I don't edit my podcast, all the coughs, all the that's all
mhm,
in there. And anybody that has ever edited a video or made their own, like especially podcasters in general, if they do a lot of editing, they can tell when a podcast does have editing in it, because it's like,
absolutely.
whoa, did you hear that? And you're like, what? And you have to go kind of back a second, like listen. And it sounds like it skips. It sounds like there was a cut, there was a trim, and you're
No,
like,
yeah, yeah. I was sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you. That also, there's a natural element that's missing. It feels very scripted, and it's like anything that's scripted. You're right. It's like you could. There's. I prefer the conversation being natural the way you do your podcast. To be honest with you, that's what I
you
love
lose the
listening to.
realness of it.
I agree.
There was a thing in there's so many of Joe Rogan's when I've been listening to him like constantly all the time. I started picking up stuff. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. There sounds like there's about 10 minutes cut out of this. Like
Oh
there's
wow.
their conversation skips, and I'm like, Jamie, you may be the fastest typer in the business, but you're not exactly the so smooth on editing. Because I heard he was having a conversation, and they immediately like it was skipped over, and then it just went off onto a different subject. I was like, hold on a second.
Interesting.
I was like, I heard the pause. I heard that change, but I want to know what was said. Apparently it was like there was one with what do you call it? Bob Lazar, the newest one
Oh
that came out.
yeah.
There was a cut in that. There's been cuts with comedians. They say a certain name and Jamie edits it out.
Okay.
And sometimes they just immediately take out the whole thing. I know Bernie Sanders had a couple things that he said that they ended up editing out. He didn't want in there. And I'm like, you're coming onto a podcast, okay? Nobody's prying information into you. It's a conversation. So if you bring it up, that's on you. You know, you have to pay the ramifications. You have to pay the piper. You know, that's why Joe now does a thing where he has people sign a waiver, you know, to be on, just so you
Mhm.
can't yell at him and say, take it down, take it down. It's like, no, you came on here. This is what you kind of get.
Yep. I like that. I mean, I think the reason why podcasts are so huge right now is because of that element, the element of authenticity. And a lot of people are tuning into those stuff now. They're not really sitting on at their TVs at night listening to talk shows or anything like that. There's like this new age or this new wave of just like getting information, and I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting to see where everything's going. Even in film, like just the way in which people are watching movies now is changing big time, and it's affecting a lot of the ways movies are made, but it's also affecting a lot of the kinds of movies being made, and like certain like that's why we're seeing a a large amount of films that are remakes or sequels or just familiar material instead of original content. I think has a lot to do with the way that we consume stuff, because people just swipe when they're not feeling
We're living in
entertained
a
anymore.
we're living in a world of technology where we're more connected to our phone, and half the time on our phone we don't even remember what we're doing because we're just mindlessly scrolling.
Right.
I mean, I feel like everything gets thrown back, at least because they think they can redo it and make it better. I'm like, sometimes it was meant for that era. You know, some movies aren't lasting as well today. They messed up
Mhm.
The Lion King. They messed up so many things by just making it kind of too real for people. I feel like some of the like I like watching older movies. I like watching like old westerns and things of this sort because you get to see the terrible acting. You get to see
Right.
the material that was used for the filming process. You get to see that it was kind of like, oh, they didn't have a very big budget for this, you know. But that's what made the movie have character.
I agree. There's passion in that, and that's the thing. Like when those films that you're talking about got made, originally there was passion behind it. Even if it's been dated by now, you can feel that passion. Today, if they remake that, yeah, you can throw in $1 million extra dollars or $100 million extra dollars in the budget, but when there's no passion, you're missing that key element. And that's why movies like you said, The Lion King was just completely trash, because I mean, to rehash something just because we have the technology to make it look real, that to me, that's not, there's no passion there. It's literally just it's a product of the machine. And unfortunately, those are the movies though that make all the money. And then when they make all the money, those are the movies that get made over and over again. So
It's all the money aspect. I mean, Disney freaking bought up the whole damn any competition. Basically, they're buying out, Marvel. They're buying out everything just on the concept of we're going to be the only ones that are making movies, so you have to watch a Disney film now. Disney used to just be cartoon movies and these things for kids. Now it's like they're hitting like blockbuster horror films and stuff. I'm like, when you really want to take in what genre of music did it better back in the day, horror movies. It was it actually scared me. It wasn't like how it is today. It seems like it's the same damn concept over and over again. I'm just sitting there like, all right, really? It's a demon possession again. It's a ghost thing again. Oh my God, Michael Myers 8. I had some dude who was a horror podcaster tell me like, oh man, you don't understand, dude. It goes back to the second one. I'm like, then they realized they fucked up the other 6 times. Like, you can't keep doing more stuff and feed. It turns into Fast and Furious, man.
Dude, I agree. I totally agree with that. I mean, with Halloween, especially, like I thought the newest Halloween was a great Halloween. I thought it was actually well done. But if you have to disregard the previous 5 or 6 and say that Halloween one from the 80s that John Carpenter did, and then this one that was released like a year ago, those are the only 2 that matter, then what? That doesn't make sense. What was happening between there? You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, dude, I totally get it. And
it's the realness aspect of it. Because if you look back, they didn't have CGI. They didn't have the type of technology we have today where they'll be like, oh, we'll edit it out in post. Oh, just act like you're holding a knife and we'll just Photoshop it in. Okay, you're good.
Right.
Back then it was like, no, you got to get in the position. You got to run at me with a knife and you got to act like you're going to kill me. And if I literally don't move, you're actually going to cut me. That's what's got to happen, because that creates real acting. I don't if you saw the Joe Rogan episode with Joey Diaz, they pulled up what was it? The Longest Yard, the original one.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen that.
I don't think I saw it. No.
It's Burt Reynolds.
Okay.
And so he's talking to the girl, and in the beginning, he full on slaps the shit out of her. He actually hit her.
I've seen the movie. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
That's her actually reacting and freaking out. That's him actually going, because that's what it was. He's like, you don't, it's the same thing. What is it? There was one guy that put out a gun, and he was pointing at an actor, and the actor was just like, okay, it's a gun. Act scared. You're not acting scared. Okay, grabbed a real gun, shot it near him. He's like, oh shit. He goes, now you know what it looks like to get shot with a gun. So act that way. It backed away. The Godfather, for example. Horsehead.
Right. Yep. Real one. Yep.
That was a legit one. And it's funny because you sit there and you'd be like, that's a real horse head. And you're sitting there, what? And then you get that reaction on camera. That's what creates something. That's where, I don't know a whole lot of actors that can just do that knowing it's a prop.
That's true. I mean, I think you made a good point with like the CGI and stuff too. I think props are a little bit easier and give at least the actor something. Like if it's a good actor, they can react in a pretty good way. But even good actors, if you just give them a green block that's going to be digitally enhanced and digitally, like, then we'll put a horse head on that instead of at least a prop of a horse head would be better. It gives them something to work with, something to look at, to hold. And like that's the biggest difference, I think, more than anything. But I do know what you mean. It's like getting that authentic look, and it's just not happening on a lot of different elements of filmmaking nowadays because it's all CGI. I mean, I don't know if you saw the new remake for Aladdin, but
originally Will Smith was apparently black. He was his normal skin color, and then they added after they released the trailer, they added the blue to him. Is that what happened?
Yeah, I mean that's what it looks like. At least there's no way it was like painted or like makeup or anything. Ironically, Will Smith's probably the best part of that movie, but the part that that's not even the worst thing. Like I understand a CGI genie. For me, you have this $1 billion studio, Disney, making this really beloved movie or remaking the movie that was once really beloved. And then you have three major locations. So the film took place in the desert a lot. It took place in the palace, and then it took place in the village. Yet all three locations were shot on studio green screen. And it's like, I mean, I get it. You're saving money, but the
Go
outcome
go to fucking Egypt. Go to wherever you have to go to film the shit. You know what I
that's
mean?
what I totally agree with you, dude. It's like, it's crazy because I mean, Morocco is a huge filming location for a lot of Hollywood productions when they want it to be the Middle East and stuff. I mean, Morocco is, I guess, technically Middle East area, but like, if you know, it's a place where Hollywood goes all the time. I mean, there's just no excuse. Like, you could have gone, you know what I mean? And then they're not doing it. They're pumping them out with CGI and they're making them, you know, they're just
We're too
crazy.
nulled. We're comfortably numb with the
Mhm.
amount of shit they just keep piling into our face. They want us to be like, oh, they're going to take it anyway. They're going to watch it anyway. There
Right.
are things when they bring back stuff, it's like, yeah, they did a good job with that. But I realize if I don't like it, it's because it's not fit for me as an audience anymore. I can't watch any of the new Star Wars. I can't do any
Yeah.
of that. It's hard for me. But, you know, I've talked to parents who grew up with Star Wars as a kid, and they talk about it helps them connect with their child. Even if they don't like the movie, they enjoy that now that their kid wants to go find the originals, wants to find the lost tapes in a way. And I'm like, it makes sense. Like, it seems like when you have any really, really good movie, it's a lot by independent people.
Mhm.
Especially like some of my favorites, Seth Rogen and James Franco, whenever they pull a movie together. Who does not love The fucking Interview?
Right. Right. Yeah. It's a great movie.
And it's like, because that reflected onto them. That was their
Mhm.
company that was running that. They were making that. They were like, if we even try and cheap anybody out of this, and not be ourselves, we're going to be it's going to be lost. I mean, this is the end. I probably have seen that millions of times.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's great. It's a great movie. And like, that's all, you know, I mean, yes, that's CGI a lot of it, but it's like they went places, you know, and they did it, and they put the work in. You know what it is? You can sense the passion. In these Disney movies, there's just no passion. It's product. And that's kind of the shame. And I mean, look, as a filmmaker myself, like, I understand it. I'm not, I don't like to come off like I'm a contrarian to this stuff, because I know there's a lot of people out there that are like, oh, you know, this new movies, there's no more originality. I mean, like, I don't want to be like that. But as somebody who, you know, does a film podcast and does review movies, not only that, but I like study filmmaking, it's just easier for me to sense like when these filmmakers actually took the time and actually like doing what they do. Plus, I do think it's important. Movies like, I don't know if you heard or saw, like Midsummer, you know, like that just got released in July. Movies like that get seen because it really expands it can really expand like audiences just thoughts or ways of thinking. I mean, it's not like it's a mind or a life changing film, but it's like little movies like that I think are important, you know, artistically speaking.
I think a lot of movies that are really, really good don't get looked at a lot just because, you know, some of the independent films, the ones that sneak into the theaters, like they don't really have a whole lot of advertising, a lot of like, hey, we're out here. This is a new movie come out. Like,
Yeah,
you know, Baby Driver, dude.
great movie.
That music, everything about it. I
Hmm.
mean, in the beginning where the music going with the steering wheel,
Yeah,
ba-na-na,
yeah.
like that was badass. Fast and
Hmm.
Furious, though. Okay. How many times are we going to keep doing this? That's why they did Hobbs and Shaw, because
Yeah, yeah.
they had to dive off. They realized they can't do another fucking one.
That, and also The Rock's trying to take over that entire franchise. That's why him and Vin Diesel can't stand each other.
Yeah, and people talk about like, oh, it's just a thing for views. I'm like, no, there's tension in the mix. I think there's a little tension with the Fast and Furious group.
I think so too. They don't need to. They don't need views. I mean, that franchise is one of the most successful in history. And I mean, they're already in production with the ninth Fast and Furious movie. They're already got a Hobbs and Shaw sequel. Excuse me. So they don't need the views. And I think like their beef is a little bit real. I mean, it's got to be. But also, I mean, The Rock he's another actor that's very much a product of Hollywood, just making stuff just because he's making money, and he just wants to become
Well,
beyond that
he's known
superstar.
as an influencer. That's what everybody talks about him back. Like, Rock should be president. Rock should be this. I'm like,
Yeah,
Rock's a guy, you know, he works out, he does this, that's wonderful. He has a lot of time to do stuff. Okay. But, you know, you have to admire the small ones too. You can't look at
yeah.
everybody like that. Like Johnny Depp, okay, that guy's fucking insane. Really good actor, but he's
Hmm.
bought 46 houses. He does not live or rent in any of them. Like, he lives in one and that's it. Like, why don't you just rent this one out? They're like, no, it's not going to happen. They're like, well, you could sell it to somebody or do this and then have more money. No, you're running out of money, Johnny. I'll make another Pirates of the Caribbean. So we'll probably like see 68 Pirates of the Caribbean.
Right. Well, he keeps running out of money, and that's the problem. He's, like you said, got 40 some houses.
It's all about, like, I've seen movies. I got a really good favorite one that they actually redid, and I did not like the new version. Pet Sematary.
Okay.
I saw that when I was 14 years old.
Yeah.
The freaking kid running into the street, and the truck came, and all you see is this shoe just roll after the truck hit, and this dude just scream.
Mm-hmm.
That scared the living hell out of me. Where I was like, actually, like, oh my God, like, I felt the impact. Like, so many movies, very, like, they're good. Okay, they do give you a bit of a scare, but it seems like it falls on the same basis of a jump scare.
Correct. Yeah.
But for a movie to literally leave you after watching it fucked up, or just like, whoa, okay, that doesn't happen nowadays anymore. You forget about it 5 minutes later. I think any movie, like, for example, American Sniper, Lone Survivor, that was all a propaganda act. That was all like, as soon as you leave the movie theater, you're going right down the street to the recruitment office and you're signing up. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
And there's what was that one movie? Oh God, I just thought of it and I lost it. But when it comes to movies that have this type of impact on you, you don't see it too much nowadays. Like watching Signs with Mel Gibson, the story behind that, people are like, "Oh, it's just a dumb alien movie with the water." I was like, M. Night Shyamalan is a fucking amazing director.
Yeah. No, he's good. He's got a lot. Him specifically. He's got a lot of hits, a couple misses. Some of his stuff's just like, I don't know.
I didn't understand The Village that much. I was
The Village and The Happening, I think, are his two. Oh, and Avatar: The Last Airbender. What's that?
You hate The Happening? I thought that was cool because it scared me from ever looking at plants the same. I always think that, like, on a different frequency. Like, you're gonna make me jump in front of a lawnmower, you son of a bitch. Yeah,
that's funny, man. No, I was not crazy about The Happening. You know what it was though? It wasn't the idea of the plants. I think the execution, the dialogue of the movie is really bad for me. I didn't like it at all. But also just the way the movie was shot and everything, especially coming from M. Night, I felt that it could have been a lot better. I'm a huge fan of his Unbreakable trilogy, Unbreakable, Split, and and Glass.
When Glass came out, I was immediately like, I'm fucking seeing that. That's all three of them in one. Are you kidding me? And how he connected them all together. That's where you see the M. Night Shyamalan everybody knows. Lady in the Water, one of my favorite movies. It's all about his twists and his turns that make his movie so popular. And it seemed like in The Village and some of these things, it wasn't as like catchy. It wasn't as like hit you right in the impact.
I agree. I think, well, like, again, he even did like The Last Airbender. He did the live action Avatar: The Last. Yeah, and I think it's because, I mean, I don't know if you think about like studio interferences too. The studio themselves could have had a lot to do with why that movie just didn't do well, and maybe he had plans and they kept getting in the way. But he seems to do a lot better with crafting his own stories from the writing process all the way up to directing. But I think it'd be interesting though if he did a movie that did not have a twist, because then that would be the twist.
Then we wouldn't know it was an M. Night Shyamalan movie.
That's true. But I feel like he's so like, just advertise it as an M. Night movie because it is, and then he's so like, it's so predictable. Like, okay, the twist is somewhere, but then just never have the twist. It cuts to credits and you're like, oh, what the fuck just happened? Like all the characters died, but no one came back to life or something.
Do you have Netflix?
I do.
There's a show on there called The Norm Macdonald Show. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I have heard of it. It's new, isn't it? Because Norm Macdonald just did it, right?
He's got like a full first season. I think he's still got new seasons coming out, but he had M. Night Shyamalan on, and they were talking to him about like, how about you try writing a movie without a twist ending? And he was like, because then you wouldn't know I fucking produced the movie. Like, he goes, I don't try and write myself in, but if I wrote a movie and didn't like throw it at the beginning or the end saying this is an M. Night Shyamalan production, you would never know I wrote it. He's
it's
like,
true.
But he talks about from his perspective, like it's hard because he wants to dive out of the twist endings. He doesn't want to have that twist always in there. He wants to have just a regular movie. But every movie like he's talked about that he relates to with that is like Avatar: Last Airbender, The Happening, these types of movies. He goes, the twist, I was trying to fade off of it. I wasn't really trying to give it such an impactful one. And it got it crap. Nobody wanted to go really see it as well. And I was like, that's true. And that's what we talk about, pressure on directors and just filmmaking in general. There's pressure put on the actors. Christian Bale, prime example. He played Dick Cheney, 240 something pounds. Before that, he played Batman, a lean 196. Then before that, he played in The Machinist, a 124. His gaps from what he does to his body. I understand when people hear him freaking out about a guy that didn't have the prop table or didn't have the condiment table set up right.
Right.
It's because he goes so far into his craft, he doesn't understand the concept that people don't take it as seriously as him. He feels like if someone's not paying attention or lagging, it's very, very difficult for him to kind of conceptualize that.
Yeah. No, I mean, he's a great example of like a committed actor. Sometimes I think he takes it too far. And I don't mean it in the way like how he freaked out on that one guy on set.
I mean like going to Holocaust survivor weight level.
I mean, like it's cool. And we talked about realism in movies. That's as real as it gets as far as, quote unquote prosthetics and stuff like that. There is none of that. It's all real. And I appreciate that. I think like as a viewer, as a moviegoer, I do appreciate that when actors do get involved in their role. But I mean, I do think it's a little crazy sometimes too. I think what's great is how actors get in shape for their roles. I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with doing that at all. Cutting weight if you need to, getting a little heavier if you need to, but going from The Machinist to Dick Cheney. I mean, like, I don't know. I don't know. He has a gifted body because it's very difficult for anyone to just do that. Like usually people stay within the realm of what their natural body type is.
Yeah, lose 5 pounds, put on 5 pounds.
Depending, of course, on their diet and the extreme that they might go to. But like, no, he literally like goes from like an ectomorph to a mesomorph, or is it endomorph? I think, where it's like the thinnest of thin type body type to the biggest body type in Vice. So it's just crazy. It's crazy what he does.
Yeah, they talk about force feeding themselves, these types of things. This is where actors develop mental disorders and these types of things for just a role that they played in. Jason Momoa recently got a shit ton of crap for having a dad bod.
Which is insane because he doesn't have a dad bod anyway. You know what I mean?
Okay, look, I'm a fitness freak. I have a six pack. Let me tell you something. I admire Jason Momoa, and people are like, "What, are you gay?" I'm like, no, I know how hard it takes to get a body like that. I know what that's like to keep that 24/7. And
dude.
the way he did that for the film, he had to come out and say it like, I was on a weekend trip with my kids. We were vacationing. It was my birthday weekend. I had cake and beer. Sorry, I couldn't keep the six pack 24/7. I did that for the film. I don't keep that year round, people. You get into a status like that, but you can't live there. I've lived out a life of being 3% body fat for years. I'm at about 5 now. But let me tell you something. It's not fucking fun. It's not something. You're cold when it's 90 degrees out. You're freaking restricting on what you're eating. You feel like, oh, my life is just getting bland. But it's like you do so much nowadays just to try and structure your life off what others think of you, whether it's a film, whether it's just your body in general.
Well, that's what social media is doing, man. I mean, like, it's funny. I was just having this conversation with somebody about just like toxic, like the internet being toxic, and specifically with social media. And, we were talking about like topics like, depression and even like these crazy things happening here, like these shootings and stuff. And a lot of people like to blame, is it guns? Is, even that old argument of, is it video games, which we all know it's just not true anymore. But I do believe the reason why people are so angry and so depressed and so willing to act so violently is just because of social media. And when you're an actor and you get like all this heat from something as stupid as like having a dad bod, that's easy to just kind of wave off. The guy's still going to get acting roles. The guy's still going to do what he's going to do. At the end of the day, he doesn't care. At least I don't think he does. Who knows what they actually feel. But when you're talking about people like me and you and just normal people on the street, if they get hammed or hammered on something, it can affect them. It starts messing with you. You think everyone's looking at you, and that's where people start to get triggered and do some crazy stuff. So I think it's just a social media thing.
people are becoming full because the way we're expressing ourselves when we're trying to find the connectivity where we used to talk to our parents, we used to talk to
Yeah.
people around us that were close to us. We look for social media to be the example now. We structure our lives off celebrities instead of structuring our lives off of your parents, a superhero, these types of things. You put faith in people that are flawed and you think that they're
Mm,
perfect. So when they do mess up, it's a giant thing that kind of ruins your whole life. And you got to realize, like, this is the same thing they do with music nowadays. They make a song about a girl and they talk about, Bo Burnham says it best. I love your bluish, brownish, greenish eye color. Like, they make it so damn vague. So every girl listening is like, he's talking about me.
right.
I love that you have an arm on either side. Well, thanks for talking about most of the chicks out there. There's one
That's
girl in the back with
fantastic.
one arm, like, damn
Yeah.
it.
That's fantastic.
But it highlights the weirdest part about people. We want a way of connecting, but we look at our phone for that source nowadays is because we're too afraid to saying anything or doing anything that might offend somebody and not realizing it might not offend somebody. It might just be like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. It's like, damn, it's over with. That's all you have to say. There's
Right.
there's nothing else to get into an argument about, but everyone's so willing to step in and be like, oh, you don't feel the way I feel. It's like,
Mm,
no, because we all are different in
yeah, man.
100% unique ways,
Hmm. Hmm.
And I wanted to ask you, what is your favorite all-time film if you had to choose one? Whether it was, if you want to do it in two categories, one being the amount of time and the amount of effort you saw, whether it was in acting or whether it was in directing, or just the amount of money that was spent on it, where it was kind of crappy acting, but they still did good with just how much money they put into it.
Yeah, I get asked that a lot, and it's always very hard to answer because I always feel like my answer changes just depending on the day. Um, I can tell you this: one of my the one movie I always think to, and it's just because I love the genre, is the first original Alien movie that Ridley Scott did. I'm just a huge sci-fi nerd, I guess, geek. I love watching science fiction films. I think it's one of the hardest movies to try to make, and then so when they're done really well, it's like it's really good. Um, but yeah, I'm trying to think of other examples or another category for it. I mean, I have I have a top 10 list, and that's another example of always changing movies. What I like to do is I can't really give an all time, but I can definitely give some of my favorites genre within the genre. So
Okay.
one of my favorite comedies of all time is Tropic Thunder. I think
Oh yeah.
I think a comedy like that just will never get made again because it's just
Because the only time you can ever do blackface again, that was the last time.
that was it. I mean, they literally just missed the mark, and that's why I don't think we'll get a sequel anytime soon, if ever. Which is a shame. But you know what? At the same time, Tropic Thunder is just such a classic. I can quote that movie beginning to end. I mean, I've seen it a bunch of times.
Have you seen the
Um,
commentary for that?
I have not, but I hear because I don't own the DVD, but I hear it's fantastic.
You
I hear it's
gotta look
hilarious.
at that, dude.
Yeah.
That is the funniest thing. You're hearing all these actors talk about it. And I love in the beginning, they tell them like they're filming a movie. I love that whole concept. Like, it's
Yep.
Jeff Portnoy,
Yep.
Jeff Portnoy in the Fatties Part 2. And he's like, people just love me for my farts. I'm like, the whole character basis. I'm a big Jack Black fan, from his
Yeah.
music to his movies. And that was one of my all-time favorite movies, Tenacious D.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
gave the concept of the band. People are like, that was complete trash. People trash the Green Lantern too. Even Ryan Reynolds hates the Green Lantern. I think it sucked that it was CGI, the costume. I think they definitely rushed and missed out a lot of stuff. But I'm a big Green Lantern fan, and sadly, he doesn't have a movie for himself. So that was the first movie. So I was like, man, if it sucks, it sucks. I'm still gonna love it on the concept of, man, it's something. It's the only one I got.
Right, you're a fan of the character, and
Yeah.
the movie that they made unfortunately wasn't as good as it could be. Yeah, I know the feeling of that, man. I mean, especially with superhero stuff. I love superheroes, and I'm a big. It's weird. I hate to say I'm a comic book fan because I haven't read a lot of the comics, but I'm a comic book movie fan more than anything. Like I love the movies and stuff. Um, and yeah, there's every once in a while you get some movies where you're excited to see the characters and they just bomb them, and so I think a lot of comic book fans understand that feeling.
Who's your favorite superhero from Marvel and DC?
DC. I honestly I think Superman just because he's got a lot more of a sentimental uh, uh, meaning in my life. Just from growing up, like my dad was always Superman fan, so I kind of grew up with like Superman being the hero. But of course, I mean, I know so much about Batman. I'm looking forward to the Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix, like no one's business. I cannot wait for that. And then on Marvel, Spider-Man for sure. Spider-Man was honestly, I think, aside from Superman, I think Spider-Man was the hero that got me into it from the beginning. I also grew up with the Tobey Maguire films.
Okay, all right, we're talking about Tobey Maguire. That's good. I don't
Yeah.
like Tom Holland. I don't like that guy.
I don't mind him. I know where you're I don't like the way that Marvel and Sony, I don't like what they did with the character. Very inaccurate from the comics. And so that's why for me, yeah, Maguire is definitely my favorite.
They make him too like jokey. That's not what Tobey Maguire did in Spider-Man. A lot of people gave shit for the third one. I enjoyed it because watching the first one, like that was when I was growing up in school and dealing with all the anxiety and stress from bullies, whatever. And it was like you saw this kid that had this power. Next thing you know, he's getting into a fist fight by some lockers, and then the dude goes to punch, and the dude just like you feel like Matrix like going back to see it, like what's happening. Dude can't hit him, and it's like, holy crap, this nerd just won. And it was like that was still on the concept. Like I found it really, really funny when they did superhero movie. I don't know if
yes, I've seen it like once, I think. Yeah.
Have you ever seen The Naked Gun?
No, that's one thing that I have not.
You have to watch that. That is a detective show. Like he's like. It's the old guy from superhero movie. He plays Frank. It's with OJ.
Yes.
OJ's an actor in it too. So you see OJ like being funny. You're like, this guy, he has something in him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because Naked Gun's literally like epic movie or scary movie. It's like that, but it's in a detective style and it's kind of seen as real. And it was funny because he was talking to this girl. He's like, "Are you ready?" And she's like, "Did you bring protection?" He goes, "Yes." And then they're wearing full body condoms and they're just flopping on top of each other. But it was like seeing this older guy play this thing. It was funny, especially they used to have him on Netflix. But like there was one part he was like, "Stick your hands up," and he goes, "We're gonna search you." The guy sticks his hands up, and the one dude reaches over to reach into his pockets and reaches into his partner's pockets and starts pulling out all these guns. He's like, "Oh, you don't have any guns on you, huh?" And he keeps pulling it out. And the guy's like, "Get him, Frank, get him!" And it's like that stupid type of humor where it was like dumb slapstick comedy. It was so impactful too, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah. Well, it's interesting too. I think when we were like growing up, that really like the kinds of movies that we see, as we're just getting older and like in middle school and elementary school before that. I think that's kind of how we are shaped as people. Like movies really influence our sense of humor, our sense of what's important to us. I think it's more impactful than people think. Like I talk to a lot of people who aren't necessarily into films the way like I am or somebody like you might be. But they've seen movies. I mean, who hasn't? And I don't think even they realize how impactful movies have probably been in their lives. It's one of those things where it's like, I think on a subconscious level almost, movies are just, they're a huge part of our culture as I think Americans, but beyond that too, worldwide. I mean, American films get seen all around the world. So
what's one movie that even watching it and doing the type of director, like kind of looking at it from that angle, what's one movie you're like, this just is overall trash?
Trying to think. I mean, there's a lot. Trying to think of one that I mean, you mentioned like Star Wars. None of the new ones except maybe Rogue One were good. So I think a lot of those were trash. I'm trying to think though recently. What was really bad recently that came out was the latest installment of Men in Black. I really that and the remake for Hellboy. Those were the two worst movies of this past year. And I've never walked out of a movie before, and to this day I still haven't. But those two movies I highly considered just leaving, but I didn't because again I do my podcast and I was reviewing them, so I wanted to make sure that I had at least sat through them so I can give a solid review, even though I knew what my review was going to be.
Well, like it's crazy because a lot of people, when it comes to reviews, nobody ever takes the time to write a good review. You know, yeah, unless it's your job, unless you feel like you're obliged or you're a giant fan of whatever you just saw or whatever you just ate or whatever you just experienced. But more
Right.
people write bad reviews. You know, I saw a podcast with someone that does a podcast on the good reviews and looking at the optimistic side of movies. And I'm like, what do you call it? He's like, it's called Fresh Tomatoes. I'm like, oh, you're the opposite of the site that literally trashes all movies, no matter how good it is. Like, it's hard nowadays because everyone's opinion's different. Some movies are going to click with some people. I know people that loved Les Miserables. I can't watch that. I'm looking at it.
Right.
I'm like, when are the Wolverine claws coming out?
Right.
When am I going to see Hugh Jackman here slice up some motherfuckers? I don't want to see him singing about his day. And then Anne Hathaway. I'm like, Anne, I like you, but you got something about you with your teeth that is scaring the crap out of me. And we talk about like, you know, let's look at Nickolas Cage. Okay, very good actor.
Yes.
Nowadays his movies are the same damn thing over and over and over again. There's 10 movies on Netflix, all with different names, all different directors, but they all have the same exact detailed description. Someone took his wife. He's on a rampage. I'm like, is this turning into the Taken movies? I love Liam Neeson to death. But I see the Taken movies. I'm like, he's the only guy that could do the same role over and over and over again. I mean, one of my all-time favorite movies, The Gray.
I love The Gray. A lot of people did not like it, and I actually really appreciated it. I liked it a lot.
It shows you what happens when you crash with a bunch of people. You know, it takes exactly 7 days for you to decide to start thinking about eating somebody. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that movie was really cool because it was more about the people than it was about the wolves. The wolves were more. I looked at the wolves more like it's just their fear manifested into these beasts. You know, because the wolves were very exaggerated too. But like, yeah, I really liked it. I didn't think that movie needed to be like this action fight scene at the end because everybody hated the end. They're like, oh my God, we got all the way here and we didn't see a fight. The fight wasn't what was important. The important part was how
they had to survive.
They had to survive, and what Liam Neeson's character goes through from beginning to end is just insane. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I always forget about that movie, but I loved it.
And the story where they were trying to escape from the wolves and get farther from the den because they knew that's why they were getting attacked. And at the ending, he lands right in the fucking den. Like, whoa. And like they're killing themselves most of the time. They're trying to survive. One dude gets stuck underwater and the dude's trying to save them. They told a story to it. You know, they didn't just feed you the same line. I mean, The Walking Dead was good till about 4 seasons, and then it was like, what? Like, you can't keep doing this. You can't have the same concept. Oh, they got to go over there. Oh, there's zombies in the way. They have to fight zombies. All right. How many Sundays do I have to wait to watch that? You know what I mean? I stopped after around the 4th, 5th season because I was like, this is just the same stuff. It wasn't like back when I first saw it on like HBO, and I'm like, what is this show? Click on it, first season. I'm hooked every Sunday, waking up, making sure I was there, making sure I was staying up for that. As soon as I got home from school, made sure that was my only plan for that night was watching The Walking Dead and those commercials you'd sit through. But you'd sit through the commercials because it was an enjoyable flick. But
yeah, man, I think sometimes a sign for a show going weird or bad or whatever is a lot of times when you see spinoffs, especially spinoffs during the original show. And I mean, there's no look. I mean, if a show's lasting forever, making its money, I understand why they'd want to continue it. But if you're going past like 5, 6 seasons, it's time to start wrapping it up. Start thinking about the end because. I mean, look, like, yeah, you lost interest. And the truth is there's so much content out there. You're like, if I'm watching the same boring crap every single week, I'm going to go watch another show. I'm going to go watch a Netflix original. I'm going to go watch whatever, you know, there's no need for the same garbage all over.
You want to know a really good superhero show that did not get looked at a lot and it's really hard to find nowadays, but it used to be a drama on, I think, TNT, Heroes.
Heroes was good. I saw Heroes.
Ooh,
I liked it a lot.
I used to watch that with my mom, dude.
Mhm.
Like, when I was a kid and seeing that, and it was awesome because they're like hour-long episodes.
Yeah.
It's like the show Supernatural. Like, we're all, what is it, 14 seasons? I've seen it all.
Right.
It's because they create a different concept. They don't just go, oh, we're hunting a ghost, we're hunting a demon the whole time. No, they create a story, but they realize
Mhm.
they have to dive into more like folklore. They have to always kind of change it up, create humor in it too. It's not going to be the same bland bull crap all the time. They actually give you these characters that you can actually fall behind. And the
Yeah.
true best part about movies is if they do that, because movies understand they're 2 to 3 hours sometimes. I
Mhm.
remember sitting through fucking King Kong in the
Mhm.
theaters when it came out, and I'm like, is this movie even close to over? Holy
Right.
shit, I've had to piss for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I hear people still watch Avengers Endgame, and they're like, this is the times you can go to the bathroom. I'm like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you have to plan it out? I'm like,
Right.
sometimes it's like, you could have wrapped this up a little bit quicker, don't you know?
Right. I agree with you on that. I mean, I don't personally myself, I don't mind a long movie. Maybe it's just because I like watching them. And especially if it's a movie I'm looking forward to, I kind of like the length. But don't get me wrong. I mean, yeah, I just saw It Chapter 2
I heard that
on
was terrible.
Friday and Saturday. You know what? The first one I am a huge fan of. The first It that came out 2 years ago. I loved it. It definitely falls into the idea that you were saying earlier, a lot of jump scares and stuff. But I really fell in love with it because of the way that the director and the writers were showing the fear of the characters. So like the first movie really executed that well for me. I also felt it was scarier than the second one. This one, they were going for a similar vibe. They're going for a similar idea of having the fear being manifested in different ways depending on the characters and how it evolved, because these characters were kids and now they're adults in the second movie. So they were kind of evolving their fears. And it is like a 2 hour and 50-minute film. It's a long movie. Especially for a horror movie.
It's hard to keep
Um,
an audience's attention for that long too.
it is, especially for horror too, because like one thing that I had been mentioning before the movie came out, when they announced the runtime being an hour 50, or I'm sorry, 2 hours and 50 minutes. I remember thinking to myself, how are they going to keep the audience scared that whole time? I mean, horror movies aren't typically long because at some point it's just exhausting to be scared, and it's like, okay, well, I'm not that scared anymore. So how do you keep that tension? I was worried about that, and unfortunately, there's a lot of moments in this movie that rehash a lot of the same style of horror that the first one had, so it's a little predictable. And then it didn't really try to do anything new. I, I don't want to blame it too much because I think the subject matter of the sequel had played a part in it, which is based off the book. Because if you look at like the end or the second half of the It book, a lot of in a weird way, it kind of gets almost sci-fi, almost fantasy territory instead of straight up horror. But I think that's what made the first one a lot better for me. So anyway, my point being is the runtime. Yeah, I mean, like if it's a long movie, you definitely run the issue of losing the audience early on, and then but for me, it's like I don't mind it too much. It just kind of depends. It depends, I guess.
Some Disney movies that really, really impacted me, like It, or not
Mhm.
It, Up, like that
Up,
whole,
up, yeah, yeah, yeah.
man, that beginning, like
Mhm.
I was sitting there and I was like, fuck,
Yeah,
right in the beginning,
yeah,
like it got you hooked just like that. My dad always brings up the fact, Dark Knight, the very first scene, bank robbery, bam,
hmm,
my dad was hooked. He's sitting there
yeah.
like, that's the best movie. I'm like,
One of my favorite movies of all time,
I'm
for
like, it's
sure.
a good movie. Heath Ledger playing the Joker.
Hmm.
Whoa. That's why it scared me when I saw the new trailer for with
For Joker.
Joaquin Phoenix. I was like, is he gonna do it right? And what I've seen, they have a little bit of their own creative way of kind of telling the story. He was beat up and
Hmm.
all these things, not his dad torturing him and making the scars with his face.
Yeah.
And I hear this, I'm like, I hope they do it well. Sadly, is when you see a trailer, when you see these types of things, it gives you a false kind of perception of what the movie's going to be about. A lot of times I've seen trailers and I'm like, wow, that was a lot better than the movie. That was a
Y-
hell of a lot better.
Yeah, the biggest problem with trailers is they give away too much a lot of times, and so I'm hoping like with a movie like The Joker, they kind of stop. Like I don't want to see anything else. Just leave it alone. The movie comes out in less than a month. There's no need for like a third trailer. But it's funny we're talking about Christopher Nolan too, because he's got a new movie coming out called Tenet. I don't know if you've heard about it or if you've seen any teasers for it, but Tenet is his newest film since he did Dunkirk a couple years ago. And in what I love about Nolan is he's very like, he loves traditional cinema. So for his movie, you can only see the trailers at the theater. It's not released online anywhere. Someone did leak a Russian version of the trailer, so you could see the trailer if you want. The text is in Russian, but it's the same exact trailer otherwise. But if you watch the trailer, you'll watch it. It's a teaser. It's maybe like a minute and 20 seconds long. It literally tells you nothing. You will probably be more confused beyond belief after you finish the trailer. But what I love about that is that fact alone, that I don't know what it's about, except the music sounds awesome. The acting seems like it's going to be pretty decent. And I'm also confused. So that's great because I don't want to know anything else. And honestly, if he only has that teaser, Christopher Nolan's such a great filmmaker where people are going to see his stuff. So if he only has that teaser released, people will see it. The studio, I don't think has anything to worry about.
It's like the name Michael Bay. You hear that, you're immediately going to watch it because you think Transformers. But some of Michael Bay's films haven't been that good. There's been some that have been like, did you really need to do that?
Right.
Especially like when you hear TV shows. I don't know. I know you stick to movies and stuff. I don't know if you focus on TV shows at all.
I do sometimes, yeah.
But one thing that really messed me up, The Fresh Prince, they replaced the mom like 3 different times.
I know there were at least 2 actresses that did her character, and they kind of did like they transitioned right in the middle of the show.
It's like you're watching the show and like you see this kind of light skinned black woman on there, and the next thing you know, she's completely dark skinned. Like, what happened?
Right.
What happened?
All right. I guess contracts got, terminated. Who knows? I don't know,
That's what it says. So many things have to fall together when you have a TV show and you have a movie, especially something that lasts literally the test of time so far.
Mm-hmm.
The Fresh Prince. Like, they literally told Will Smith when he signed up, like, what name do you want to go by? And someone told him, like, hey, use your actual name because this is what people are going to remember you as.
Very true.
He goes, what? He goes, just use Will Smith. He used Will Smith. You know who you don't really understand his name and you have to kind of look it up on your own? Alfonso.
Right.
Oh, Carlton. How do you everybody remember? Hey, Carlton, do the Carlton. He's like, oh my God.
Yep. It's funny, man. And speaking of names, like celebrities and actors and stuff, is like Schwarzenegger. He's got that famous story where his agents told him, like, listen, man, you got to change that name. Nobody's going to want to say it. Nobody knows what it means. Nobody knows how to pronounce it. And he's like, no, I'm going to keep it because if when you see that up on the screens, people are going to know exactly who I am. And he stuck to his guns, and now everybody knows how to say Schwarzenegger, no problem. And like, you don't even have to read the whole thing.
There's still a little bit of tension on the word. People are always like, oh, you're like that guy from Terminator. Remember Terminator? Like, oh, I know him. It turns into Voldemort, the name you do not pronounce. I'm like, it's part of his name. He had really good movies. Danny DeVito. He had so many good flicks. And, we can talk about Tom Hanks, Tom Hanks and Forrest Gump, that was the only time, like, you never go full retard. Okay.
Right.
But that was an impactful movie because it was good. And then you see Sully, like, oh man, what's happening? You're not giving the same kind of emphasis on your character because you already got a name out there. Sadly, a lot of celebrities that drew really hard on their first one, they fade off later. And they're like, I don't feel like keeping the same impact to it. There's very, very few that choose to keep it going after that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there's very far and few actors, though, who I think when they, throughout a career, if they have like a crazy filmography and just have so many roles under their belt, it's very far and few that they can maintain the constant or consistent just quality of acting. But I think a lot of that, a lot of it has to do with what you said about like just kind of losing that touch because maybe they're so successful they don't feel like they need to do it anymore. But I think also a lot of it depends on sometimes the team that they work with, like the different directors. It's interesting to look at certain actors and their performances with certain directors and then look at them from other directors. Not to say that, their acting style or the way that they perform their characters in general is good or bad, but like there's a little bit of differences. We talked about like Nick Cage. He's one of those guys, like he definitely has some awesome movies and awesome roles. Then he's got some stuff that's not so great. But what I really like about Nicolas Cage is that you almost don't really need to be a director with him on set. You just have to give him the script and he's going to do what he's going to do anyway. And so I don't know if you saw the movie. It recently came out that Nick Cage was in called Mandy. I think it came out like a year ago or something.
I haven't seen that one.
It's a really good movie considering what Nick's been doing, what Cage has been up to. Like, because he did a movie, you can watch it on Hulu called Mom and Dad. I don't know if you've seen that. That's a very, very goofy movie. Maybe worth a watch because of how bad it is, to be honest. It's very laughable. But Mandy is one of those movies where he does the classic psycho, like Nick Cage, just kind of performance, but in the context of what the film's about and the subject matter, and also just stylistically how the film looks, it's perfect. It's a very perfect revenge type story, and I think it's perfect for somebody like Cage. So, yeah, I mean, when it comes to performances, I do think sometimes you got to look at like the directors too, because directors, as much as they like, they get bad reps sometimes because of a movie not being good for story's sake, they also should be looked at if a performance is bad too, because they're the ones in charge of performances. It's funny, directors always get blamed when a movie's bad, and then the writers always get blamed when the movie's good. And it should be the other way around sometimes.
Yeah, I was trying to look up the movie that I watched as a kid, Mortal Kombat. Okay, I want to
Okay.
see a remake of that. I want to
They're
see
working on it.
I want to see, but they've been saying that for years now. I want to see that shit happen. I want to see it in theaters. I remember being a
Yeah.
kid. My parents are broadcasters. They own radio stations. They
Oh,
do
very
these
nice.
types of things. So it's like when I was a kid, I didn't have a babysitter. My dad was like, "Hey, bud, it's 4 a.m. I'm going to put the pillow in the car. You can sleep on the ride into work, but we got to go to the radio station. You got to come with me to work today." I'm a little kid, like kind of like in kindergarten, still kind of, I'm like, all right. So bringing my little pillow, carried it into the studio. My dad sat me down in the conference room. He gave me
Yeah.
one of those swirly chairs. It's freaking 5 a.m. I'm
Yeah.
not going back to bed. You got
No.
a vending machine down the hall. My dad's just walking in, dropping Mountain Dew cans on the table and dropping candy, Skittles and things. He's like, "You all right?" He'd check every like commercial break, everything he'd do after he would do his stuff. And he'd come in every 10 minutes. "You all right? You need anything?" I'm like eating fucking Skittles. Like I could be in class right now and I'm not, and I'm happy as can be.
I'm feeling great.
He set up a little TV for me. I saw the Pokemon movie and I
There you
saw
go.
Mortal Kombat religiously, the older one. So I'm sitting there trying to watch and I'm like, what's happened? I'm seeing people get thrown off ledges and thrown onto spikes. I'm like, I'm a little kid. I'm not understanding this 100%. But it was a sense of freedom. And there's a
Hmm.
nostalgia you get from these movies that literally creates an effect where I think about that back in the day. I think about that
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, man. I mean, well, that's the reason why movies are being remade all the time now. I mean, even movies that like maybe you or me might not really like so much, for other people, it does create the nostalgia, which I understand. I mean, I think it's great if movies get remade for certain reasons. But again, I think there's got to be that element of passion. You've got to get the right people involved for these remakes, people that are fans. And a lot of times these movies are being made by people that are just professionals. These guys are just getting a paycheck. There's a big difference. I heard that they are going to remake it, and James Wan, the director of Aquaman and some of those classic horror movies like The Conjuring and stuff, he'll be at the helm of doing the remakes. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I hope it happens because it would be cool to see like a modern, even though it's not that old, but like a much more up to date, maybe realistic looking sort of Mortal Kombat film. I don't know. Who knows?
Do you have an example of a movie that you watched and was like, it's all right, and then you find out something about it later where you're like, whoa, that's awesome. That makes you like the movie even more?
I think I think the original or the first Blade Runner for me, because Blade Runner, when I first saw that movie at the very first time, I didn't get it. And I think most people were probably on the same page as me. Didn't really get it. I loved the way it visually looked. I thought it was great, but I just didn't understand it. Then I did some research and I fell in love with it. And then I was super excited for the sequel that came out like 2, 3 years ago. That's an example. I'm trying to think of some other ones as well. Definitely going to film school. Like I've talked about this with some people. I'm not a huge fan of film school, even though I went to it. I think that if I could do things over again, I might have done it a little differently. But going to film school did kind of open my eyes up to a lot of movies that I may not have either seen or may have looked at differently. I think The Shining is another example of a movie that I thought was like, I guess. But then like, I think for me, sometimes I hear the hype too much and I'm like, I don't get it and I'm not going to bother with it. But then when I do find time to study it, it's like, okay, I could see where you're coming from now.
That's
Like it
why it's
makes sense.
best not to look at reviews before you go see a movie. You have to
For
get the
sure.
interpretation for yourself. A lot of times, like one of my movies that I found I liked after I watched it was Men Who Stare at Goats.
That's a
Um,
good movie.
it's actually based on a real government project called Project Jedi, and I found out
Mm.
10 years later, or about basically last year, that my mom went to that high school where they did all that government testing and stuff.
Oh,
I'm like, oh
wow.
shit, it happened an hour away from me. That George Clooney thing was real. They're like, yeah, they did. Movie ties it up a good, but that dude, General Alberbine or Stubblebine, the guy that used to, like, you saw him, he was like funded the project and everything. He would run into walls and bounce back. That was a real guy that would do that. There's recordings, documents that say, like, from people that were in the office next to them, like, he's just ramming in himself into a wall, and literally he broke through the wall at one point with his head. It was
Wow.
plaster, so he went through it. And then, like, next thing you know, they just started building him a breakaway wall, like one that he hits and he flies right through, just so he could stop hurting himself. But you find that out after you watch the movie, and it's like 10 years later, it makes you bam, like instant classic in your head, even if the movie's
Yeah.
like all right. You know what I mean?
For sure. I think movies that are based on crazy, crazy true stories definitely add an element of like, oh my God, this is 10 times better now. An example of that for me was, and we talked about Michael Bay, his movie Pain and Gain. I don't know if you've seen it, based on a
Yeah.
true story. It's like it makes the movie that much crazier and that much more fun to watch because you're like, this actually happened. Like that's insane, and
You have
it's
to you have
yeah.
to realize where they Hollywooded it up too. But
Oh,
like
for sure.
Pain and Gain, I mean, that was you see Marky Mark and you don't did see the Funky Bunch though. But like
Right.
that whole aspect, like Jordan Belfort, that was a really good
There you
movie.
go.
Wall Street, that was
Yeah.
a good concept, even though he talked about a lot of it being Hollywooded up. But he had Leonardo DiCaprio in it, and it was like that guy deserved an Oscar way before. But it all comes down to, he was even saying, media views and who wants to get, who's in the limelight for that time. It's all about who you
Mhm.
know. And
Mhm.
I find that sometimes movies, actors, they don't get looked at with the proper credit they should be analyzed with.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, but then I also think like there's something about the awards in general that are just a little bit of like,
One-sided.
yeah, one-sided, and you I think people forget like the awards uh, uh, are chosen by people who have their own opinions, and it's not always cycled, and it's the same people choosing what movies that they like or that they're trying to push. I mean, it's a tricky thing because I do watch the awards. I do get into them during award season, but then the other half of me too is like, whatever. What are you gonna do? I think it's more impressive when a movie gets praised like at film festivals or like more independent sort of awards or something like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be Oscars or the Emmys for like TV shows and stuff or things like that. Plus, I think the biggest thing now is like with social media, you can really kind of see if your stuff's really getting a following, and you can really see if the project that you're working on is getting a fan base, which could be a bad thing too, because then you have shows which I love, like Stranger Things, and I do love that show, but that's got such a pop culture following. I wouldn't really put in the same realm as like some of these more quote unquote artistic
I
shows. And
What makes any good movie, makes any good show is based on how that artist choose to put all their effort into it. If they choose to be a little bit like, I'm just going to throw money at this and gloss it over, it might be good to some people's eyes, but for a true film person and true person to actually take away something from it, it's got to be impactful. It's got
Mhm.
to be something that literally creates emotion in yourself for it to truly resonate as a good movie inside of your head. And Nick, I appreciate you being on my podcast, man. It's been awesome shooting the shit with you about movies, man. I want to give
Yeah,
you
dude.
a minute at the end to kind of plug your own stuff.
Thanks, man. Listen. I thank you for having me. Thanks for reaching out. That's awesome that you did that, and I'm so glad this worked out as quick as it did too. Yeah. So, like I said, I do my own podcast. It's called Here's My Take. It's a film podcast. I usually do reviews and release those after I see the films at the end of every weekend. So those usually get out on Sundays. And then I try to get. I haven't skipped a week yet since I started, but I get a discussion episode out every Wednesday. And those episodes, I try to get guests on, sometimes people that I know personally that are into either filmmaking or storytelling in general. And we just talk about movies, stories, all kinds of TV shows, what I'm watching, and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Here's my take. It's on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Play. It's on Stitcher, pretty much anywhere you get your podcast. And then we're also on Instagram and Facebook for social media.
Well, thank you so much, Nick, for being on, and stay tuned for another episode Out of the Blank podcast.